everybody, and welcome to Community Spotlight, exclusively here on RCN in the Delaware Valley and Lehigh Valley. Glad you could join us. I'm Dan Mowdy. How many businesses do you know in the Lehigh Valley area that have been serving the public for 75 years? How about 85 years? How about 90 years? I think you could probably count them on one or two hands throughout the entire Lehigh Valley. Well, Cantelmi hardware store in Bethlehem and Forks Township can boast of 92 years of excellent customer service and always having what you need for whatever project you might be working on. We're very lucky to have with us here the third generation of ownership for Cantelmi's hardware store, Rick Cantelmi. Rick, welcome to Community Spotlight.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Now, Rick, I know you weren't there at the start of the Cantelmi story, but your grandfather was. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your grandfather and how, coming from Italy, he has the tools, you know, the knowledge and the know-how and the go-get-it kind of attitude that helps him start the hardware store that is still in existence today and thriving.
Well, I think what happened was, I know what happened, is he went to work at a local paint store down on 3rd Street, and the Bethlehem Steel was booming at the time, and South Bethlehem was growing, and there was need for another hardware store or paint store. We actually opened up as a paint store.
Oh, wow.
And paint and glass, and it was, I would say, 1,000 square foot. And as the demand came, he added a large addition to the back of the store, and he added hardware. So by 1926, we were selling paint and hardware and glass and whatnot.
Wow, wow. And you're talking about the original location.
Right, which was 507 East 4th Street, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Wow, phenomenal. And to your credit, while you expanded and even had to relocate, you still stayed on that block where people knew you best, perhaps.
Yes, the block, we moved in 1986, jumping ahead here though, we moved to an old silk mill, which was 100 feet away. But move a hardware store 100 feet or 10 miles, it's a lot of work.
Oh, I can only imagine.
So my grandfather, back in 1922, opened up and prospered. Built a home up in Packer Avenue that still stands today. So when Lehigh did their knocking down of all the buildings to build all the Sinclair Lab and all that other stuff, they took a whole city block and eminently domain and knocked it down. My grandfather's house still exists at 203 East Packer Avenue, and it's used by Lehigh.
Oh, how about that?
And I spent many nights sleeping there, so when I drive by and look at it, I know that I used to sleep in that house.
Fantastic. That could very well be a city landmark before it's all over, if it's not already. Sounds interesting. Back in those days, I mean, it had to be challenging to, you know, come to America, whole new culture, different language, learn the ropes of the business world, and know how to start a business that would, like I said, continue on beyond 90 years. What do you see, you know, looking back and the times that you had with your grandfather, what do you see as some of the qualities that he had that made that all happen?
I got to work with him quite a few times. He passed away in 1966, and I was born in 54. So my first pay I actually got, and I have an envelope that says Richard's pay, 25 cents. It's from my grandfather, gave it to me when I was 8 years old, and I spent a day in the hardware store. I used to be sort of a terror back then. I would go into the padlocks and try out a padlock with the key, and then put the key in the wrong box, and they had to go back and put all the padlocks back together because I would take pipes and start screwing pipes together and whatnot. But what I would say about him was he taught me that the customer comes first. If you're coming down an aisle and you're putting something away, like product that was delivered, and a customer comes next to you, put down that product and wait on the customer. Because without him, you don't need the product.
It's very good advice. Absolutely. And to this day, customer service seems to be what is the leading mantra, if you will, for Cantelmi hardware.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my initial meetings with any of my employees, I'll tell them that same story about putting away the stuff and stopping and waiting and making eye contact, getting to know your customers on their first name basis.
Right, right. So you kind of grew up in the store in a lot of regard, a lot of ways.
Yeah, this picture here shows me actually in my grandfather's arms with my father here and my Uncle Dino, who was a mortician in Fountain Hill. I was 6 months old, and we were in the old hardware store at that point. So that's my first something that shows I was there. I remember something about this was that there was paper bags weren't used yet at that point.
Oh.
It was just wrapping paper, and there was a string that came down from the ceiling, and whatever item you got, you wrapped it in paper, and there's a string that came down all to, and you would tie a bow and give them the package. There wasn't paper bags yet.
Wow, that's phenomenal. That's brings back memories for some folks, and it's well beyond the memories of a lot of folks out there.
And I still have the paper rack that we used to pull out with the paper on and cut it. I saved it.
Phenomenal. That's kind of how I remember bakeries being growing up, with the string coming down on those balls,
right.
And you just pulled from that, and and then you had the paper there to wrap up whatever you were going to send home or box up. As far as the hardware industry, and I'm kind of jumping here a little bit, but so much has changed over the years, and as a result, products have changed too. I know you brought something that I've never seen here before that I guess isn't sold anymore and probably isn't used anymore.
They're collectibles. People collect them, but when I first started working full-time in the store, which is about 1973, propane tanks became popular as using for soldering instead of these things, which was a white gas torch, basically Coleman fuel. The story behind this one was it sat on the shelf for years because all these propane tanks were being sold, and people weren't buying these anymore because they were sort of dangerous to use. So after about 10 years, I said, you know what? I'm going to take that and put that in the side because no one's buying it, and someday it's going to be worth, to me at least.
Oh, yeah.
It's worth something.
Sure.
And some people do collect them.
It says gasoline blowtorch
yes.
in there.
And it's used for soldering. And you would fill this top up with white gas and then light it with a match. And then it was flames, and it would get this thing very hot. Then you would open this valve, and it would be just like a propane torch.
My goodness.
But you would fill it with gasoline.
Phenomenal. Rick, we're going to take a quick break here. This is interesting stuff. We're going to talk more about Cantelmi hardware, how things have changed over the course of 92 years, and what good business practices, not just good customer service, but plenty other good advice that Rick is willing to share with other business owners out there. Stay with us on Community Spotlight. And you're back with us here on Community Spotlight. Glad you could join us. We're talking about how business was way back when and how it continues to thrive today. We have a business owner with us, Rick Cantelmi of Cantelmi Hardware, a business that's been in existence 92 years. Rick, that is just phenomenal. You're the third generation, as we mentioned. Let's talk a little bit about the significance of a neighborhood hardware store, because in the USA today, not a lot of folks have that experience unless they're of a certain age or older. And the impact and the lasting impression that a local hardware store can make on not just individuals, but an entire family.
Yeah, when I started, there was 9 hardware stores in Bethlehem. Now we have 2.
Wow.
So that's from 1972 to now, we're down to that. The hardware store was the place where we used to sell wine presses, apple cider machines,
Wow.
you name it, coal, and certainly glass and whatnot. And
So you had to accommodate immigrants coming to America who had all kinds of different skills and crafts and cottage businesses, I would think, at home while they're working at places like Bethlehem Steel and Atlas Cement and so on.
Well, yeah, not so much Atlas Cement, but Bethlehem Steel certainly was the draw. And we in Southside there was probably 5 or 6 denominations of Roman Catholic churches, like, German Roman Catholic, Windish, Hungarian, Polish, and there you can still see these steeples today. One thing I remember was that was pretty important was a story I was told to me that my grandfather would be very generous with people when they needed it during the Depression. And oftentimes, let's say a glass window would break or something like that. It's cold out. The cold air's coming in. What are you going to do? They came in, they called him Patsy. His real name was Placido, but they called him Patsy. Everybody did. And they would say, Patsy, I don't have any money, but I have a broken window. And he would cut him a piece of glass and say, pay me when you get the money. Nothing on paper, nothing like that. And that was during the Depression. And when the Depression ended and the Bethlehem Steel became very busy because of the war effort, they all remembered him and came back and paid him, and then they continued to support him and the store afterwards.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And that's the way it used to be.
Yeah,
that was the credit card of the day with no interest in most cases, especially for the local hardware store, depending on the owners, of course. That's interesting. Speaking of Bethlehem Steel, that has also been a source of business, the direct business to
Bethlehem Steel. I would, it's first off, it's a shame that it's not there anymore. But I used to deliver to the Bethlehem Steel 2 or 3 times a week personally into the plant. I knew the inside of the plant very well.
Wow.
The plant used to come to us and buy from all the different departments, and of course the other part of it was the employees. We had the corporation and we had the company. The corporation is the big tall building where the offices were. And they would have lunch from 12 to 1 and 1 to 2. And after they would eat, they would all come up and walk and walk the loop, and we were close enough that we would get a major influx of people every day between 12 and 1 and 1 and 2. So much so that we had to have all our lunches done by 12. We started eating at 11 because we knew at 12 we were going to get hit. Then, of course, there was the shift, and we opened at 6:30 in the morning, or even earlier. My dad would be there at 6. Well, the 7 o'clock shift for the plant, the guys would come in before work, and then at 3 o'clock on the way home, they would come out after work.
Right.
We closed at 5:30 because you couldn't leave at 5 o'clock, because when the corporation let out in the main office building, it was gridlock.
Oh, I'll bet.
Cars were parked and nobody was moving. It was like New York City, so you just might as well stay open. And we would pick up customers then too.
That's great. As far as the environment and the community, it was kind of the true melting pot. It probably was a microcosm of what we call a melting pot for its day. Because like you mentioned, you had all of the different cultures, and it seems like they came to America in waves to work at the Bethlehem Steel plant.
Yes.
What a challenge to accommodate so many different languages and
that
cultures.
Was funny. My dad had a way that he knew how to say hello or a few words to most people in their language, and he would greet them that way, like hello, and I can't remember the words, and he would or mention like the leader of the country who was popular, and how's this guy and that guy, and there was bantering going back and forth, and oftentimes the people had just come over from their respective countries and still had the accents.
Right.
And it was a lot of loyalty there.
Excellent. It's a sad fact these days, Rick, and as you know, family-run businesses have like a 50% failure rate going from the first generation to the second.
Yes.
But your dad did a marvelous job of carrying the ball, and like your grandfather before him, not meeting the best of times throughout his time as the owner of Cantelmi Hardware Store. Tell us a little bit about your dad and some of the things that rubbed off on you.
Well, my dad, I believe, started working in the hardware store around 1937. I think he went to school, I know he went to school till around 11th grade. And then he started, and he was the second employee. And he basically, helped the store grow. He bought the building next door, which was a restaurant, knocked the wall down, doubled the size of the store, then bought the next building next door, knocked the wall down, and doubled, and we kept growing and growing and growing. He, but it was two of them running it. And they would close the store and pull down the shades and do at the end of the day bookwork and counting of the money, and then go home. I remember oftentimes that I would be there with my grandfather, and he would always walk home to lunch. He never drove a car. He owned a car, but my father drove him in the car.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, and I would go up to lunch, which was just a block or two away, and have it with my grandfather, have a grilled cheese sandwich, and then come back to work.
Excellent, excellent. Rick, we're going to take another quick break here. We'll be back in just a bit, talking a little bit about where Cantelmi's is today and how it competes with some of those bigger box stores out there. Stay with us here on Community Spotlight. Business, how it was then and how it is today. And it's some of what we're talking about here with Rick Cantelmi of Cantelmi Hardware. I have a photograph for you to take a look at. Rick receiving the key to the city of Bethlehem upon Cantelmi Hardware's 90th anniversary in South Bethlehem. And 521 East 4th Street is the location. Do you call it the new location for Bethlehem, Rick?
Well, we've been there now for our first 65 years we spent in the original location.
Right, just down the street, same block.
100 feet away.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
First 65 years.
And that's the second location. You received that key to the city from
Mayor Callahan.
Mayor Callahan. And today, folks can find Cantelmi Hardware in a completely different realm, if you will, in Forks Township, just north of Easton.
In 2006, we opened up a satellite location. We built a building, a 20,000 square foot building.
Wow.
Freestanding, one floor, made for hardware, shaped for hardware, has a outdoor lawn and garden center where we have live plants and do stuff that we can't do in Bethlehem.
What were some of the ingredients? I mean, that's a tall order. You're known as that local friendly hardware store in the middle of Center City, Bethlehem. The complexion of that location, I understand, has changed over the years in that you started out helping out the folks that lived in the area, and you still do, but now you have plenty of commercial accounts and contractors that come in there. Now, it's almost as though this is a major competitive realm for the big box stores that even has a garden center.
What we did is we positioned ourselves. Ace went around and looked where all the big box stores already were, and looked where the houses were, and put yourself between them. And if you give them better service and competitive pricing, they will shop with you instead of going to the other store. And that's what's happened.
And the year again that you started the
2006.
Now, this was just before a really drop of the market.
I'll tell you what, 2008 was a tough time for both stores. And it was very difficult to have that major financial undertaking and then have that happen. There's still some fallout from that for sure.
Yeah.
And also, of course, right now I think one of the major players here is the internet and e-commerce.
Interesting.
Because the big box stores certainly have the hours and have a lot of product, but if you go into either of our stores, we pretty much have the same stuff they do except for the wood. But e-commerce and the internet, people don't have to get it. They just sit at their computer and type away, and so we are moving toward that.
I can imagine.
We are going to be having a 3-hour pickup where they can actually go into our inventory of our store, see what we have, reserve it, we get it ready for them, and they can come in and pick it up 3 hours later.
Wow, that's excellent. So either at home, in the backyard, the basement, the job site, mobile device, start making your order, send it into Cantelmi, and then 3 hours would be the pickup time.
Yes, correct.
Excellent. That's phenomenal. What are some of the differences that you see between the original location in South Bethlehem and the relatively new one, 2006, you said?
Well,
Forks
Bethlehem,
Township?
we are very commercially oriented. We do a lot of our sales which are non-taxable, meaning that we're doing it with municipalities, universities, cities, and of course people off the street. And Forks Township, so our busiest days in Bethlehem are Monday through Friday. In Forks Township, our busiest days are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, when the people, because they're all working in New Jersey or somewhere, and they have a lot. The yards are much bigger down there. Instead of half a double, they have yards where they have, need for lawn and gardening supplies, fertilizers, whatnot. Totally different way of ordering product.
Yeah.
We sell a lot of Weber grills, stuff like that.
And we're showing some of the contact information and where you'll find Cantelmi's Hardware in Bethlehem, 92 years strong, and more recently in Forks Township as well. And Rick, what do you see as the future of the hardware business and also for Cantelmi's? You mentioned the online presence, certainly something that you're building.
And hopefully, after a year or two, the plan is that possibly one or two of my children are planning to have expressed interest in coming into the store.
It's so hard to pin them down these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I have, of course, my wife Rose, and I have a 28-year-old, a 26-year-old, and a 23-year-old. All have graduated from college, and a few of them are looking at the possibility of coming in and helping and becoming the fourth generation. Right. Which would be wonderful.
Absolutely. It's got to be in their blood, you would think, huh?
They all have worked there.
That's great.
They have.
Excellent. And then you have a great philosophy when it comes to the employees that work for Cantelmi. It sounds like it's kind of a family situation for them as well.
For sure. Yeah, I provide health insurance.
Excellent.
Always have.
Before we go, I got to ask you what that little box is next to you. It's the one thing we haven't talked about.
Well, looks it's a box of brass wood screws. But the point about it is, it's the quantity. Today, you go to any place and you buy screws, and you'll get screws, and there will be a box of 100. This is one gross. Back then, in the day, screws were sold by the gross. And when I saw this laying on the shelf, I said, I better grab this and put it in my little museum in my office.
Yeah. I guess the bins where you pick them, has that gone by the wayside at all hardware stores at this point?
The bins?
Where you pick singles out, is that?
No, we have that complete. No.
Still have that?
No, we do.
Thank goodness.
No, that's one of our busiest departments. You can get one screw.
Nice. I don't know where else in the world you'll find that. Cantelmi's is one of them.
No prepackaged.
Excellent. Rick Cantelmi, thanks for joining us here on Community Spotlight. Folks, we hope you enjoyed a bit of a trip down memory lane and also learned a little bit about how business survives 92 years of some pretty tough times along the way. Glad you could join us tonight on Community Spotlight. Good night, everybody.